Okay, the other element, of course, I've been talking about is this idea of reviewing and monitoring where we're at. And this is critical for our plans. So we've just gone through a, a huge body of information about setting up great plans, going through the process of breaking them down, identifying all the critical components of it. We're really building a terrific roadmap to get us from where we are now to where we need to go into the future. And we've considered as many of the potential things that could go wrong. We've tried to identify as many of the resources as possible so that we can increase the likelihood of success at every corner. What we want to do now is that we want to make sure that we keep our finger on the pulse in terms of how we're performing against these plans because we know that the landscape is not going to remain static from the moment that we start to the moment that we end. Things always change, and we get um, currents and forces from all directions as we're trying to execute our plans. So we have to keep our finger on the pulse in terms of how our plans are going because if we don't, we may have some variation. And of course, the longer that we take to pick up variation, the greater the gap between where we need to be and where we are will be. So if you pick up a 1% variance or variation on a plan or a pathway within 24 hours, that gap is going to be tiny compared to if you pick it up a month later, where it's going to be quite significant. 1% will manifest itself into a large gap the longer you leave it. And of course, variance often is a lot more than 1%. So keeping our finger on the pulse. And the way that we do this is through two key mechanisms, controlling and monitoring. Controlling really is about getting the information that we need to be able to make an assessment, and monitoring is about reviewing that to see how we're going. So if our if in our plans we've written up good plans, we've got good KPIs embedded within that, we've got good quality standards written within the tasks, and we've got good timelines about when things are supposed to happen. If we are gathering information, say it might be as simple as having daily scrums or weekly reviews where we're asking people, okay, we're supposed to be doing this task this week. How are we going on it? And we're getting feedback, and it's been supported by any quantitative data that we're getting from reports and so forth. We're able to keep our finger on the pulse. And if there's any variation, so one of our team says, "Oh well, I'm a little bit behind," and someone else in our team says, "Well, I'm a little bit in front," we might be able to shift some resources from the team in front to help the team behind, and we can nip that in the bud pretty quickly. Whereas if we don't do that and the team falling behind is behind for a week, the gap to bridge it might be significantly larger by the time we get to it. So the controlling and monitoring mechanism may be as simple as just having uh, embedded within our plan regular review meetings against the performance milestones, the targets, and the goals. But it can also be things that can be such things like reporting, getting the right reports with the right data, and it might be in terms of error rates or delivery times or uh, performance against critical performance indicators. It may also be things like audits where we've got dedicated individuals going and checking things. So, from a quality perspective, we might be doing random quality checks, for example, as an audit, and then having meetings to review those responses. It can also be things such as reviewing budgets or any other form of spreadsheets that are capturing and recording and reporting on data and then sitting down and seeing how they match against budgets, forecasts, and so forth. And I'll talk more about financials shortly. But these are all examples of controlling and monitoring mechanisms to ensure that as the manager responsible for these plans, that we've got our finger on the pulse and that we're identifying variation where it occurs. And we should be measuring against things such as I said, against those milestones and so forth, against our plans or against our schedules, like especially in a project context where we've got schedule, you might have a Gantt chart or something like that, against any of those operational performance plans, against any quality type plans or any key performance indicators or anything of the similar ilk. we compare it. We compare the actual against what we had planned, and we identify where there's variation and take corrective action where required. Now, what does that mean? Well, corrective action can mean lots of things. Or I should say, let me take a step back. Variance or variation can mean lots of things. In some cases, it means nothing at all. In some cases, it can mean a lot. Variation doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do something. If the variation is within tolerance, it's acceptable, it's expected, because it's something that we recognize that the goalposts have shifted and it's been signed off, and that's fine. We're going on track. It means that we're going to take 2 weeks longer to do it, but we've already been able to identify that, and the appropriate people have already accepted that. Then we don't have to do anything about it. We just identify it, we notate it, we capture it, and we record it. We let all the relevant stakeholders know, but we don't need to take any action because it's within acceptance. However, in other cases, it might be that we've gone off track. So there's variation because we were supposed to do steps 1, 2, 3, 4, but we've only done 1, 2, 3. There's a gap for 4 because we haven't done that yet. And that might mean things such as training, or it might mean invest in additional resources, getting additional people in there, or more time or more money, depending on what the variance is and the corrective action required. So in this case, there's been a deviation or some variance. We identify that we need to do something about it, and we put in some corrective action. And again, we capture and record all this. Just goes without saying. But the third one might be where the goalposts have shifted, but we haven't picked it up until now. So we identify that there's deviation or variance. We review it, and we identify that actually we don't need to go back to the plan because the plan is now obsolete because something has changed that we didn't foresee or we didn't expect. So in that case, we have to go back and revise the plan. So the plan, luckily for us, is a living, breathing document. It's organic. So we're going to go back and we're going to tweak the plan. So we're going to change the goals, change the targets, the actions, timelines, and so forth. But of course, importantly, we've then got to go through the process of gaining authority, making sure that those key stakeholders who need to sign it off, who have got the authority to do so, who have been delegated the authority, can do that. And then we notify all the relevant stakeholders so everybody's aware of where we're at. So the important part of the controlling and monitoring, the reviewing, making sure we keep our finger on the pulse, making sure we identify where things go off track, and that we keep people in the loop, and we get we shift resources around as required, we alter plans as required, and we keep people in the loop. That again, that communication, let them know where it's going. So at no point there's any surprises down the track. And of course, when we're looking at variation and any deviation, it's good for us also to think about what's the causes of those. So before I said, yeah, you especially where it comes to corrective action, I said, you put in do some extra training, or put in some extra resources. But that's a pretty simplified view. Sherman Horn's model is a really good one. I like this one. There's lots of models out there, but I like this one just to keep it simple, especially for a pragmatic, on the go, thinking about when performance gaps occur, particularly, because it helps to break down the thinking into these 3 components. For great performance or good performance, you need these 3 things. You need organizational support. People, as an organization, need to let the people know what we're trying to achieve, why it's important, give them the right tools. So if you're Usain Bolt, you need to have training equipment, you need to have the right people around you in terms of the coaches to support you. You need to have the right medical team, and so forth and so forth. So that, or you need to have sponsors, so you don't have to worry about how you're going to pay the bills and so forth. These are all organizational supports. We bring it back into the workplace. This is about the workplace having the right tools for us to do things, having the right space, giving us the right training, having the right coaches and mentors around us, that we have clarity around the goals and when we have to do things, so we're clear on the plan and so forth. Individuals also have to have the ability. And this is about knowledge and about skills and so forth. So someone like Usain Bolt, uh, ability can be natural in terms of having fast twitching fibers or whatever you need to be the fastest man on the planet over 100 meters. In the workplace, it is about skill. It's about having the right competency. It's about, as some of the examples I gave before, having coaching and mentoring or formal training like a qualification and so forth. The third element is down, this is where we now get into the individual and the effort they're putting in. And you can break down effort into how important someone thinks it is and how realistically they think, how realistic they believe it can be achieved or the possibility of it being achieved. So if you think it's important and you believe that you can achieve it, you'll put in the effort. So often it's about making sure people are clear about why is this important that we're doing that and making sure that we've consulted with them in terms of goals so that they feel that they're attainable. When I went to that SMART acronym earlier.